The Tyson couple's home had never seen so many people at once. The small, faded blue-boarded house on the south side of Baltimore today could barely contain all the people who had come to pay their respects to Jamal Tyson. The sun was scorching mercilessly, forcing the air conditioner to run at maximum capacity. Jamal stood at the entrance to the living room, mechanically shaking hands with those who entered. His massive figure, draped in a black suit, seemed carved from stone. Only the jowls rolling beneath the dark skin of his face betrayed the tension. LaTanya, his wife of 35 years, had been buried this morning. Kidney failure, the doctors said. Unforeseen complications. My condolences, brother. An older man in a shabby suit hugged Jamal tightly. LaTanya was an angel. Thank you, Pastor Gaines. Jamal's voice sounded muffled, as if from the ground. His eyes remained dry, not a single tear since LaTanya had stopped breathing in the hospital room. In the corner of the room stood a picture of LaTanya, smiling, in a white nursing gown. A small altar surrounded by flowers and candles. Jamal carefully spread a white napkin at the base of the frame. Everything had to be perfect. It always is. Jamal, let me handle the guests. Aunt Ruby, his mother's cousin, sounded concerned. You need to rest. I'm fine, he said without turning around. Thank you, Auntie. But I have to take everyone in myself. But I must see everyone myself. It is my duty to her. Aunt Ruby stepped back, giving her nephew a long look. Jamal had always been stubborn, but today there was an unfamiliar note in his words, a strange mixture of guilt and relief. People were arriving in a steady stream. LaTanya's co-workers from the clinic where she'd worked for the past 10 years. Neighbors who'd seen the Tysons turn a dilapidated house into the best-maintained one on the street. Old friends, some of whom had long since moved out of the neighborhood but returned to see LaTanya off on her final journey. She was always kind to my Ty when he went into the hospital last year, the full woman sobbed, holding a paper handkerchief to her eyes. A true saint. She always made time for us. LaTanya always took care of others, Jamal replied mechanically, gently guiding the woman toward the food buffet. When the flow of guests dried up, Jamal allowed himself to relax for a moment. He looked around the room, full of muffled conversations and restrained movements. Everything was going according to plan. Everything was under control. Good turnout, remarked Roy Biggs, his colleague and the only one Jamal could call a friend. A lot of people liked LaTanya. Yeah, she had a way of getting people to like her, Jamal agreed, adjusting the impeccable knot of his tie. Always told her that her kindness to people wasn't always justified. Roy nodded, but something in his gaze changed. You've lived together for what, 15 years? 16, Jamal corrected. She came to work at the Whitman gas station where I was working then, wore those funny pink sneakers. He smiled suddenly at the memory. And she won your heart right away, didn't she? Roy sipped from his whiskey glass. Not right away. Jamal frowned. But I knew she'd be mine. She just didn't realize it yet. Something in his tone made Roy pull away. Through the open door, Jamal spotted a new face, a slender woman in a navy blue dress with neat hair. Shakira Everett, LaTanya's best friend. She stood on the threshold, as if hesitant to go inside, clutching a small purse so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. Sorry, Roy. Jamal nodded to his friend and headed for the door. Shakira visibly tensed when she saw Jamal approaching, but then she pulled herself together and squared her shoulders. Jamal. Her voice was quiet, but firm. My condolences. Jamal wrapped his arms around her, feeling the woman instantly stiffen in his grasp. When he pulled away, there was a polite smile on his face. Thank you for coming, Shakira. LaTanya has always appreciated your friendship so much. Shakira's eyes filled with rage for a moment, but she quickly got over herself. Yes, we were very close. She paused, as if choosing her words. Especially in the last few months. Jamal held back a smile, but his eyes turned cold. Yes, she often spoke of your lounging in the parlor. It would be unusual not to hear you talking on the phone until late at night. Shakira looked directly into Jamal's eyes. I'd like to take something to remember her by. Maybe that hummingbird brooch? LaTanya promised it to me a long time ago. She stammered. A long time ago. Sure, Jamal nodded. Come by during the week and I'll find it for you. He knew Shakira wasn't coming, at least not alone. While they were talking, Jamal noticed movement at the gate. A man in his 30s stood leaning against the fence watching the house. He was tall, with short dreadlocks gathered into a ponytail, wearing a simple black shirt and jeans. The stranger made no attempt to enter, just watched. Feeling Jamal's gaze, he straightened up, and for a moment their eyes met across the yard. Jamal turned to Shakira to say something, but she had already stepped back to the group of nurses, LaTanya's co-workers. When he looked at the wicket again, the stranger was already entering the courtyard, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "Who is it?" Jamal asked Roy, nodding imperceptibly toward the approaching man. Roy shrugged. "I have no idea. Maybe someone from the hospital?" LaTanya worked with a lot of people. The stranger walked over to the makeshift altar with LaTanya's picture and carefully placed the lilies. His shoulders slumped, and he touched the picture frame with his fingertips for a moment, a gesture so intimate and tender that Jamal felt the heat rise in his chest. "I recognize him," Aunt Ruby said. "He plays at the Blue Dawn, that bar on the corner of Lafayette and Fremont. LaTanya used to go there sometimes with her friends on Fridays. What's his name? Desmond, I think." The man looked up and met Jamal's gaze. He nodded slightly, then turned and started to make his way toward the exit. "I'm sorry." Jamal left his aunt and followed Desmond. He caught up with him at the gate. "Hey." Jamal put his hand on the man's shoulder, feeling the tense muscles beneath his fingers. "Thanks for coming." "Did you know my wife?" Desmond turned around slowly. His eyes were red, as if he had recently cried, but his gaze remained firm. "Yes," he answered simply. "I used to play at the bar where she sometimes went with her friends." "Never heard of you." Jamal didn't let go of his shoulder, squeezing his fingers lightly. "And LaTanya talked a lot about her friends." "I wasn't her friend." Desmond's voice was steady, but something flickered in the depths of his eyes. "Just an acquaintance. She liked jazz." "Is that why you brought her the lilies?" Jamal leaned forward a little. "Her favorite flowers? Just a coincidence." Desmond gently released his shoulder from his grip. "Again, I'm sorry for your loss. She was a very special woman." Jamal continued to watch Desmond walk toward the bus stop across the street from the house. Something about the man's gait, the line of his shoulders, the way he spoke of LaTanya made Jamal's blood boil. He felt someone's eyes on him and turned to see Shakira watching him from the window. By evening, the house was empty. Aunt Ruby insisted on staying and helping with the cleaning, but Jamal politely declined. He'd always preferred to do things himself. It was the right thing to do, cleaner, more accurate. Picking up the empty glasses in the living room, he stopped in front of a picture of LaTanya. Her smile, so bright in the photo, had become a rare guest in their home over the past year. "You're just tired at work," he told her. "You need more rest." He cared for her, always had. She just didn't always realize it. Jamal carefully removed the photograph and took it into the bedroom. There, in the jewelry box on the dressing table, he found the hummingbird brooch Shakira had mentioned. LaTanya had only worn it a few times, though Jamal had given it to her for their 10th anniversary. He remembered that night the way LaTanya had opened the box, the forced smile, the reluctance to pin the brooch to her dress. "It's too flashy, Jamal," she'd said then. "I like more modest things." But he had insisted the brooch was expensive, with real emeralds in the plumage of a tiny bird. LaTanya had to appreciate such a gift. Jamal's fingers squeezed the brooch so hard that the sharp edge dug into his skin. He put the jewelry back in the box, slammed the lid shut. Going down to the kitchen, Jamal pulled out a bottle of whiskey and poured himself a generous portion. The first sip burned his throat. The house seemed empty without LaTanya's constant, barely audible presence. Without the sound of her footsteps, the rustling of book pages, the quiet humming to the radio. She always moved so quietly, especially in recent years, as if she were afraid to disturb the space around her. After finishing his whiskey, Jamal went upstairs. In the bathroom, he took a long look at his reflection. A 40-year-old man, still strong and sturdy from years of working as a longshoreman. Not a single tear on his cheeks. Their marriage to LaTanya wasn't perfect. What marriage is perfect? But he cared for her in his own way. Changing into his home clothes, Jamal lay down on his side of the bed. The emptiness on his left side no longer seemed as wrong as it had last night. He reached out, touching the cool sheets where Latanya had slept not so long ago. Jamal knew he should feel grief, but instead, a strange, unsettling feeling grew in him. It was as if something was escaping his attention, something important. The image of Desmond touching Latanya's picture rose again before his eyes. "I wasn't her friend," he said. Shakira's look, full of furious accusation, surfaced in his mind. "We were very close, especially in the last few months." Jamal knew Latanya went out on Fridays with her friends. He never minded. She needed to unwind. The Blue Dawn was a decent place for their neighborhood. But jazz? Latanya had never mentioned she liked jazz. The anxious feeling in her chest was growing. Jamal got out of bed and walked over to the dresser. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of Latanya's sweaters, was her diary in a soft leather cover. She hadn't realized he was aware of its existence. Jamal never read it. He didn't need to know his wife's every thought. He was fine with her being happy and safe around him. But now, Jamal ran his fingers over the cover of the diary, but didn't open it. Instead, he returned it to its place and closed the drawer. Latanya was dead. What did it matter now who Desmond was or why Shakira looked at him with such hatred? Back in bed, Jamal turned off the light. The house was plunged into darkness. He closed his eyes, thinking that tonight he would finally get some sleep, without the sound of muffled sobs from the bathroom, without having to watch his every move so as not to wake his wife, who slept fragilely beside him. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time Jamal almost fell into slumber, he saw Desmond's eyes dark, full of hidden fire, and he heard his voice. She was a special woman. The clock in the downstairs living room struck midnight. Jamal lay alone in the dark bedroom, listening to the creaks of the old house, to the distant howl of sirens, to his own breathing. For a man who had just buried his wife, the night promised to be too long. Detective Malik Freeman arrived on the scene as the morning heat was beginning to be felt in the air. A patrol car and an ambulance stood by the curb, attracting the attention of the few passers-by. Neighbors looked out of windows and porches, whispering among themselves. "What do we got?" Malik nodded to the officer guarding the entrance. Jamal Tyson, 40 years old, found dead in his own living room. Officer Price took off his cap and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Badly beaten. Neighbor discovered the body this morning when he came by to borrow tools." Malik walked into the house, mentally noting how neatly everything was arranged. Not a speck of dust, every item in its place, except the living room, where the murder had occurred. Jamal Tyson's body lay at the foot of the stairs. In a strangely contorted pose, the massive figure seemed smaller in death. The face was a bloody mess. Someone had beaten with furious rage, even after the victim was obviously already dead. "Time of death?" Malik asked the medical examiner, leaning over the body. "Preliminary, between midnight and 3 a.m., Dr. Harris replied, standing up and removing his gloves. "Multiple injuries to the head and upper torso, several ribs broken, but it was probably those blows to the head that killed him." He pointed out the gruesome wounds on Tyson's face and skull. Judging by the nature of the injuries, a heavy, blunt object was used, probably a poker or something similar. Malik looked around the room. On the wall next to the fireplace, he noticed an empty hook where fireplace accessories were usually hung. "Look for the poker," he told the forensics team. "Maybe the killer took it with him or threw it somewhere nearby." The detective scrutinized the room. No sign of forced entry. Whoever did it, Tyson probably knew him or let him into the house himself. "Did the neighbors hear anything?" "No one heard anything," Price answered with a noticeable disbelief in his voice. "At least that's what they say." Malik snorted. "Typical reaction for this neighborhood. No one has seen anything, heard anything, knows anything." Above the mantelpiece hung a photograph of an attractive woman in a medical uniform. "Is that his wife?" Malik asked, pointing to the picture. "Yes, Latanya Tyson. Died 4 days ago. She was buried yesterday." Malik whistled. "So someone killed a man on the day of his wife's funeral? Shit happens, but it's a coincidence." "Yeah, and you know what else is interesting?" Price lowered his voice. "The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Clayton, told me there were a lot of people at the wake, and not everyone seemed to be grieving." "Intriguing." Malik straightened up. "I'll have to talk to this Mrs. Clayton. Talking to Mabel Clayton on her porch, Malik quickly realized that the old woman was a treasure trove of information about life on this street. They moved here, let me remember, about 16 years ago, Mrs. Clayton said, sipping iced tea. A young couple, just married. Jamal had always been bossy. You know, the kind of man who has to control his wife's every move. Did you ever see any signs of violence? Malik asked bluntly. Mrs. Clayton looked away. You see, Detective, I'm not the kind of man who pokes his nose into other people's business. Mrs. Clayton, Malik interrupted her gently. The man is dead, and if something bad was going on in this house, it might help us find the killer. The older woman took a deep breath. I've heard the screams many times over the years, sometimes a rumbling sound, as if something was breaking. LaTanya began to wear long sleeves often, even in the hottest heat. She shook her head, but she always smiled, always was polite, never complained. Did you ever call the police? Mrs. Clayton looked at Malik with a bitter smile. Once, about 10 years ago, 2 officers came, talked to Jamal on the porch, laughed, and left. And the next day, LaTanya didn't leave the house. And when I met her a week later, she had a bruise on her cheekbone. She said she had fallen. The older woman pressed her lips together. I never called the police again. Malik nodded, making a note in his notebook. Mrs. Clayton, do you know anyone named Desmond? He might have been at the wake. Tall, thin, with dreadlocks? The woman asked. Yeah, he came by. Didn't go in the house, just put the flowers down and left quickly, but I saw Jamal catch up with him at the gate. They talked, but I didn't hear what they said. As he left Mrs. Clayton's, Malik mentally made a list of people he needed to talk to. The chief had given him 48 hours to investigate before handing the case over to other detectives. Their department was always short-staffed for the growing number of crimes. The next stop was Mercy Hospital, where LaTanya Tyson worked. After talking to the head doctor, Malik got permission to talk to Dr. Audrey Chung, who had been treating LaTanya in her final days. Kidney failure, Dr. Chung confirmed, reviewing the records. But an unusual case. Usually we see a gradual deterioration of kidney function, but Mrs. Tyson had acute necrosis of renal tissue. And what could have caused that? Malik asked, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Dr. Chung took off her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. In most cases, toxins, sepsis, severe trauma. She was silent for a moment, then continued resolutely. Detective, I am obliged to inform you that Mrs. Tyson had multiple old injuries inconsistent with the explanations she gave when she was admitted to the hospital. Healing rib fractures, traces of trauma of various ages, and just prior to her last hospitalization, a severe contusion to her lower back, which the patient said she sustained in a fall down the stairs. Do you suspect the kidney damage was the result of physical abuse? I'm a doctor, not an investigator, Dr. Chung said cautiously. But I will say this. The combination of the location of the contusion and the history of previous injuries makes me doubt the accident was accidental. Malik asked for copies of LaTanya Tyson's medical records for the past 5 years. Looking through them, he saw a sad pattern. Multiple referrals for contusions, sprains, and, once, a broken arm. Each time an accident, a clumsiness, an accidental fall. The last entry was dated 4 days before death. Patient hospitalized with signs of acute renal failure. Extensive contusion in the lumbar region. According to the patient, she fell down the stairs. Taking into account the nature and location of the injury, it is recommended to consult a social worker. But the counseling never took place. LaTanya Tyson died the next day. Back at the station, Malik spread out all the collected materials on his desk. Photos from the Tyson house, medical records, statements from neighbors. A familiar and sad picture was emerging. Years of domestic violence, ending with the death of the victim, and now the death of the abuser. Revenge? Malik muttered to himself. But who? He remembered the name Desmond, the name Mrs. Clayton had mentioned. Running the name through the database, he quickly found Desmond Wharton, 30 years old, living 3 blocks from the Tysons' house. Minor offenses in his youth, but clean in recent years. Malik decided to pay him a visit. Desmond Wharton lived in a small apartment above a music store. When Malik knocked, the door opened almost immediately, as if Desmond had been expecting guests. Detective Malik Freeman. Malik showed his badge. May I come in? Desmond stepped aside silently. His apartment was modest but clean, an old couch, bookshelves, a guitar, and a saxophone on a stand in the corner. Have a seat. Desmond pointed to the only chair. I assume this is about Jamal Tyson? Malik raised an eyebrow. You already know about his death? The whole neighborhood knows. Desmond shrugged. News travels fast. You were at his wife's wake yesterday, weren't you? I was, Desmond nodded. Not for long. How did you know LaTanya Tyson? Desmond was silent for a moment, as if choosing his words. She used to come to the Blue Dawn bar where I play. We'd talk during breaks. That's it. Malik watched Desmond's facial expression carefully. There's more to all people than meets the eye, detective, Desmond replied evasively. LaTanya was a good person who deserved a better life. And her husband. What do you want to hear? Desmond's voice remained calm, but a shadow flickered in his eyes. That he was a monster? Yes, he was. Everyone knew it, but no one did anything about it. Including you? Desmond stood up and walked to the window. I tried to persuade her to leave him. Not hard enough, apparently. Where were you last night between midnight and 3 o'clock this morning? At the Blue Dawn, Desmond answered without hesitation. We had a gig until 2 o'clock in the morning, then I helped clean up before they closed. You can ask the owner, Leroy Jackson. He was there until the end. Malik wrote the name down. Do you know anyone who might have had a motive to kill Jamal Tyson? Desmond turned and looked Malik straight in the eye. Anyone who knew what he did to LaTanya? Anyone who had heard her screams over the years? Anyone who'd seen her bruises and pretended to believe stories about falling down the stairs? He paused. Including you, detective. Didn't you go into those houses and turn a blind eye because you thought it was family business? Malik felt a lump come up to his throat. Yes, there was a time when he would just leave if the husband promised to settle down, and the wife didn't want to write a statement. Years in the service had taught him that the system rarely protected victims until it was too late. I'll check your alibi, Mr. Wharton, Malik said, standing up. Don't leave town. Of course, detective. I have no reason to run. Leaving Desmond's apartment, Malik could not shake the feeling that Wharton was telling the truth, at least in part. But something in his demeanor made him wary. Malik decided to talk to the next person on his list, Shakira Everett, LaTanya's best friend. Shakira owned a small beauty salon 2 blocks from the Tysons' house. When Malik walked in, she was finishing a haircut on her latest client. Detective? Shakira recognized him as a cop immediately, even before he showed his badge. Wait in my office, I'll be right out. The office was a small room separated from the main salon area. Malik sat down and began to look around. On the wall hung pictures of Shakira with clients, with family, with friends. In one of them, he recognized LaTanya. The 2 women were smiling at the camera, embracing. Judging by the background, the photo had been taken at a bar, perhaps the very same Blue Dawn. About 5 minutes later, the door opened and Shakira walked in. It's about Jamal, isn't it? She asked without preamble. Yeah. Have you heard? The whole neighborhood is talking about it. Shakira sat down at the table. What exactly happened? He was found dead this morning. Murder. Malik watched the woman's reaction carefully. Something flashed in her eyes. Not shock, not grief. Relief? You were close friends with his wife? LaTanya was like a sister to me. Shakira's voice trembled. We met when she first moved here with Jamal. We hit it off right away. Were you aware of the problems in their marriage? Shakira chuckled bitterly. Problems are when the husband forgets to take out the trash or snores at night. They didn't have problems, detective. They had hell. She took a deep breath. Jamal controlled her every move. It wasn't so noticeable in the first few years. Then it got worse. Did she tell you about the abuse? Not right away. There were excuses at first. Then, Shakira was quiet. About 3 years ago, she confessed for the first time. Showed her bruises. We cried together. I begged her to leave him. Why didn't she? Fear, shame, hope that he would change. Shakira shook her head. Over the last year, she had begun to seriously consider running away, saving money, packing little by little. What had changed in the last year? Shakira looked at the picture on the wall, the one with LaTanya at the bar. She had met someone who had shown her that true love didn't hurt. Desmond Wharton? Shakira didn't answer, but her look was more eloquent than any words. Did he know about the beatings? Everyone knew, Shakira said quietly. Long before they met, but yes, he knew, and it killed him to see her pain and not be able to protect her. Do you think he might have killed Jamal out of revenge? I don't know who killed Jamal Tyson, detective. Shakira straightened up in her chair. But whoever did it did a favor for this world. After talking to Shakira, Malik stopped by the Blue Dawn and confirmed Desmond's alibi. The owner of the bar, Leroy Jackson, confirmed that Desmond was at the establishment before closing time, and they locked the doors together at around 3 in the morning. Did he seem normal? Malik asked. Wasn't nervous? Wasn't upset? Of course he was upset, Leroy shrugged. The woman he loved had died, but he was a professional, playing as he always did. By evening, back at the station, Malik had mixed feelings. On the one hand, Desmond's solid alibi, on the other, a clear motive. He was going over the forensics reports when the phone rang. Detective Freeman? Officer Price's voice came through the phone. We found something interesting at the Tysons' house when we did a follow-up search. There was a small hiding place in the basement, behind the washing machine. In there were letters addressed to someone named D. Looks like from the victim, LaTanya. Bring them here immediately, Malik said, feeling his pulse quicken. Half an hour later, he was looking through the contents of the folder Price had brought. The letters, about a dozen of them, were written in LaTanya's neat handwriting. They all began with the words, "My dear D," and were full of tenderness, hope, and fear. I know I must leave. Every day spent in this house takes away a part of my soul. When he raised his hand on me again last night, I swore to myself that it was the last time. I will not die here, in this house that has become my prison. You showed me what it means to be loved, not to belong to someone. Your music heals me even when my whole body aches. I've put some more money aside. When we have enough, we can start a new life away from here. I dream of a home where there is no fear, where I can breathe freely. The last letter was dated just a week before LaTanya's death. He suspects something. Yesterday, I found my phone in his hands. I don't know if he saw our messages. I told him I was going to my sister's for the weekend. He looked at me strangely and said, "Of course, darling. Family comes first. I'm scared, Dee. But I won't back down. In a week, we'll be free." Malik leaned back in his chair, trying to get the whole picture in his head. LaTanya was planning an escape from her husband. Jamal had probably found out about it, and about her affair with Desmond. Perhaps that had led to the final, fatal beating that had damaged her kidneys. And then Desmond. But the alibi. The damn alibi. Malik went through the letters again, looking for something that might provide a new lead. In the last letter, after the main text, there was a small note in more hurried handwriting. P.S. Shakira said she could lend us her cousin's car for the trip. She's the only one I can trust unconditionally. You, me, and her, we can handle it. The detective frowned. Shakira, a devoted friend who'd seen LaTanya suffer for years, who had helped plan the escape, who knew Desmond and trusted him, who had no alibi for the night of the murder. Malik gathered up the letters and folded them neatly back into the folder. Tomorrow, he would need to talk to Shakira again, and maybe one more time with Desmond. Either of them knew more than they were saying, and Malik was determined to find out the truth. Malik stayed up all night rereading LaTanya's letters. In each line was such a longing for a normal life, such hope and fear at the same time, that the detective involuntarily imagined a woman he had never met alive. She wrote about dreams, about music, about listening to Desmond play in the bar, trying to sit away from the stage so Jamal wouldn't find out the truth if his friends happened to be there. Sometimes I close my eyes and your music takes me far away from here, to a place where there's no pain, where I don't have to flinch at every loud sound, where I don't have to lie to the doctors about how I got another bruise. Yesterday, he was angry again. I forgot to buy his favorite kind of cheese. You know what the worst part is? When he takes a swing, I don't feel scared anymore. I just feel tired. That's what scares me the most. that I'm starting to get used to it. In the morning, Malik returned to the Tyson house. The forensics team had already finished their work, but the detective wanted to take another look at the crime scene. He methodically went through each room, trying to visualize what had happened that night. In Jamal and Latanya's bedroom, he stopped in front of the dresser. In the letters he'd found, Latanya had mentioned hiding her savings and important items in a hiding place Jamal doesn't know about. Malik carefully slid the drawers out, checked the bottom of each. Nothing. It wasn't until he pulled back the dresser itself that he noticed a small hole in the wall behind it. Sticking his hand in, he fumbled for something solid, a photo album wrapped in a plastic bag. Inside were pictures that Latanya had obviously taken surreptitiously. Desmond playing the saxophone, Desmond and Latanya together, selfies in a park far from their neighborhood. And then there are the medical records, the bank statements, the copy of the birth certificate, everything she needs for a new life. And underneath it all, a tattered diary. Malik opened the last entry, dated 2 days before Latanya's death. He knows. Today I found a photo of us with D in my coat pocket, though I remember exactly that I kept it in an album. Jamal didn't say anything, but his eyes, there was ice in them. I called Shakira. We decided to do it tomorrow. I won't make it to the end of the week if I stay here. The next point in Malik's investigation was a repeat visit to Shakira's salon. But this time, instead of a business conversation in the office, he suggested lunch at a small cafe across the street. He wanted the conversation to be informal so that Shakira would feel safe. I read Latanya's letters, Malik began as they sat down at a table in the far corner. And I found her diary. Shakira tensed but said nothing. She was a very brave woman, the detective continued, to plan an escape, knowing how it might end if Jamal found out. He paused. She wrote that you were the only person she trusted completely. I tried to help her, Shakira said quietly. I've been trying for years. Tell me the truth, Shakira, the whole truth. Off the record, not for the court, for Latanya. Shakira stared at her hands for a long time, then looked up at Malik and began to speak. We met when they first moved here. Latanya came to my salon. She was so lively, smiling. Jamal hadn't shown his true nature back then, at least not in public, but I noticed the way she looked at him, cautiously, checking her watch every 5 minutes, afraid she'd be late home. Shakira told how their friendship grew, how gradually Latanya began to trust her with her secrets. At first, little things, that Jamal wouldn't let her wear certain clothes, that he checked her phone, that he got angry if dinner wasn't ready on time. Then, that he'd pushed her during an argument. That was the first time. When she first came to me with a black eye, I begged her to leave him. Shakira's voice trembled. I offered to let her stay with me, but she was afraid. Said he'd find her, that he would never let her go. What changed when she met Desmond? Malik asked. Everything, Shakira answered simply. She felt for the first time in years that she deserved better, that her life could be different. How had they met? At the Blue Dawn, I took her there on her birthday. Last year, Jamal was on a road trip. Working as a trucker from time to time, she heard Desmond playing and... Shakira smiled weakly. You know, there are some people who are made for each other. They didn't even talk that night. They just exchanged glances. Shakira explained how Latanya had started sneaking around with Desmond, how they planned an escape, first to Latanya's sister in Atlanta, then maybe farther away. She was so close to freedom, Shakira whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. The day before she went to the hospital for the last time, she came to see me. She was in a terrible state. Jamal had beaten her worse than ever. She could barely walk from the pain in her back. Why didn't she go to the hospital right away? Afraid. Said Jamal went crazy when he found the photo, yelled that if he couldn't have her, no one would. She planned to leave the next day, straight from work. I was supposed to pick her up and take her to the bus station. Shakira covered her face with her hands. But she didn't show up for work. A co-worker called me and told me Latanya was in the hospital. And Desmond? Did he know about the last beating? Yes, Shakira nodded. I called him when Latanya left me that day. He wanted to go to Jamal's right away. I stopped him, told him it would only make things worse, that we should just pick her up and leave as planned. What happened when she died? Shakira took a deep breath. Desmond was... I can't describe his state of mind. He blamed himself, said he should have saved her sooner, that he shouldn't have listened to me and waited. Did he threaten Jamal? Not in front of me. Shakira shook her head. He just... withdrawn. He didn't answer his cell phone for 2 days. Then he showed up at the funeral, but he wouldn't even come inside. I figured he couldn't bring himself to be around Jamal. Malik asked the question that had plagued him from the beginning. Shakira, where were you the night Jamal was killed? The woman met his gaze without fear. At home, alone. No one can confirm that. Did you kill him? No, Shakira said firmly, though part of me wishes I had. Malik believed her. After talking to Shakira, he headed to the Blue Dawn. The bar was closed at this time of day, but the parking lot near it wasn't empty. Near the back entrance, Malik spotted a familiar figure Desmond was smoking, leaning against the wall. Detective, the musician nodded as he saw Malik approaching. Have you come to arrest me? Should I? Malik stopped beside him. I don't know, you tell me. Your alibi checks out. You were here until 3 a.m., that's right. The problem is, Malik pulled a small plastic bag of evidence from his pocket. Forensics found this in the Tysons' living room, a button from a shirt very similar to the one you were wearing at the funeral. Desmond looked closely at the evidence, but showed no emotion. There are thousands of black shirts in the city with buttons like that. That's right. But this one has microscopic traces of Jamal Tyson's blood on it, and your DNA on the inside where the button attaches to the fabric. Desmond was silent. I think what happened is this, Malik continued. You really were at the bar until 3 o'clock. You do have an alibi. But then, instead of going home, you went to Jamal Tyson's. Why would I do that? Desmond asked quietly. Because you couldn't bear the thought that he'd gone unpunished, that the system failed again, that he killed the woman you loved and just walked away from responsibility. Desmond lowered his head. Can we talk somewhere else? They went to a small park nearby, sat down on a bench, away from prying eyes and ears. She was the purest, kindest person I ever met, Desmond began, staring off into the distance. Despite everything she'd been through, there was no malice in her, just sadness and hope. Malik listened in silence. I fell in love with her at first sight, Desmond continued. Not her looks, though she was beautiful. Her soul. She sat in the farthest corner of the bar, listening to me play, and cried. Didn't try to hide the tears, just let them flow. We didn't say a word to each other that night, but I played for her. He told me how they had started seeing each other in secret, how she told him everything she'd been through, how he begged her to leave Jamal. We were planning a new life. I sold my saxophone to add money to her savings. It was worth it. It was all set. And then Jamal found out about you, Malik said quietly. Yeah, Shakira called me, said she had Latanya, that she was bruised, barely walking. I wanted to go to him right then, kill him. But Shakira stopped me, said it would only make things worse, that we should just leave the next day as planned. Desmond grinned bitterly. I had listened to her, and Latanya died. And then there was the funeral. Yeah, I wasn't going to go. But something tugged at me. I wanted to say goodbye, and I saw him there, standing by her picture, playing the grieving husband, after everything he'd done to her. Desmond clenched his fists. I could barely contain myself then. Malik knew he was about to hear the truth. What happened that night? Desmond took a deep breath. I really was at the bar until 3. Leroy wasn't lying, but when everyone left, I didn't go home. I went to Jamal's. Didn't plan to kill him, I swear. I just wanted to, I don't know, to tell him everything. Make him admit that he killed her. He opened the door for you? Yeah, surprised, but he did. I told him I knew the truth about Latanya, what he'd done to her. Do you know what he said? Desmond looked Malik straight in the eye. He laughed, said, she was my property. I could do what I wanted with her. Malik gritted his teeth involuntarily. Then he invited me in, like we were buddies about to chat. Said that Latanya had always been too emotional, that she was exaggerating, that he was just teaching her respect. Desmond shook his head. I don't remember when I grabbed the poker. It just happened to be in my hands at some point, and he was lying on the floor. Did you realize what you were doing? No. It was like I was watching from the sidelines. I just remember thinking, this is for LaTanya's broken rib. This is for the bruise on her face. That's for her fear. Desmond fell silent. Malik didn't rush him. When I finished, I realized what I'd done. Took the poker with me, threw it in the river on the way home. Thought I'd left no evidence. The button, Malik reminded me. He must have grabbed your shirt during the struggle. I guess so. Desmond looked devastated. I have no regrets, Detective. I only regret not doing it sooner when it could have saved her. Malik stared at the man sitting next to him for a long moment. Then he pulled out the handcuffs. Desmond Wharton, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Jamal Tyson. You have the right to remain silent. As they were walking to the car, Desmond suddenly stopped. Detective, can I ask you a question? Yes. If you knew what had been going on in that house for years, and you did nothing, how would you live with yourself afterward? Malik didn't answer. While Desmond was being processed at the station, Malik sat at his desk compiling his report. Dry facts, witness statements, physical evidence. None of it could convey the true tragedy of what had happened, 2 lives broken and 1 lost. As he was about to leave for home, Malik noticed a fresh newspaper on a nearby table. On the first page was a small notice. Man killed after burying his wife. A standard headline, like dozens of them every month. Malik took the paper, crumpled it up, and threw it in the hamper. On the way home, he drove past the Tysons' house. Police tape still blocked the entrance, but the yard was already empty. No journalists, no gawkers. The Tyson family tragedy was already yesterday's news. Malik stopped the car in front of the house and sat looking at it for a long time. How many houses like that in the city? How many women at this very minute are going through what LaTanya went through? How many of them would not live to see a chance at salvation? The system he served failed again. Didn't protect the victim. Didn't stop the violence before it led to death. And now another life will be wasted behind bars. Desmond will probably get at least 20 years. Juries are rarely lenient with those who take justice into their own hands, no matter how understandable their motives. Malik started the car and drove slowly away. Tomorrow there would be a new case, a new victim, a new perpetrator. The wheel would continue to turn, but today, if only briefly, he allowed himself to think about what real justice was and how far removed from it the laws he had sworn to uphold were.